Hi, my name is Brandon I. Brooks. I'm the managing editor of the Los Angeles Sentinel newspaper and also the LA Watts Times. It's my absolute pleasure today to be here with two representatives of the Los Angeles Police Department. I have Mrs. Shannon Enoch and I have Mr. Jody Steiger. Thank you both for being here today. I really appreciate
happy to be
your
here.
time.
Thanks for having us.
And today, look, we're having a series of discussions with the Los Angeles Police Department on various areas. But today we're talking about know your rights. But before we get all into that topic, I would like the public to know more about you personally, about your positions in the police department. You know what you do currently, and what got you to this point.
Sure. Currently work as a sergeant in the Office of the Chief of Staff, and so I handle special projects, one of which is partnering with the Sentinel and trying to make sure that we're bringing good connectivity between the department and the community, and so we're really grateful to have this series started. Before that, I was working in patrol in Southeast. I've worked there twice, both as an officer and a supervisor, and I've also worked Southwest, working the University Park Task Force. And before I came on the job, I was actually a station brat. So my dad was on the job, and I used to hang out at Harbor Station with him all the time. So he worked on the job for about 28 years.
Wow.
And that was kind of the selling point for me, is that he was on the job during a time that was kind of the renaissance of African Americans on the job. There were a lot of his peers that were promoting and doing big things, and I got to know a lot of them and understand why the job was important to them, and it was for a city that I love. So it made sense to join the department.
Wow. Okay.
I'm in the police department, actually 26 in April. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. From the time I was a little kid, I tell people this story all the time, that I actually didn't like the police because everybody in my neighborhood didn't like the police.
Wow.
But as I obviously got older and understood the function of the police department, I realized, just like in every situation, not all groups are bad just because people say certain things. So I came up with my own decisions.
Wow. What was ultimately that turning point? Because as you said, you're a normal citizen, maybe you had your thought, but what made you say, I want to be part of law enforcement, that personal jump?
Well, after high school, I went to the Marine Corps, and
Wow.
after serving in Desert Storm, I came back and I decided to figure out what I wanted to do for a career, because I love the military, but it wasn't enough to provide for my family. So I decided I wanted to come back to Los Angeles, and I said, what's the next best thing in the military? It was law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so coming from the Marine Corps, which is the best military branch, I said I don't want to go from one to another without it being the best, and I did my research, and LAPD, in my opinion, and at the time, was the best law enforcement agency in the country.
Yeah. And why don't you share with us a little bit about your current position, or what you currently do?
I'm currently a sergeant, and I work at the Office of the Inspector General, which is a civilian oversight for the police department.
So I think this is a good transition into, as we talk about civilian oversight, about know your rights as citizens, and as African Americans. Many times our interactions with the police isn't always, unfortunately, the best, but many times it may be good. But really, I think as a citizen, we just want to know, what are our rights, whether it's in a traffic stop, pedestrian stop. What should we look to do? What should we look not to do? So who better to talk to than you two to let us know what we can, what we cannot do, and maybe to give us some pointers or some viewpoints on how to look at it. Because as African Americans yourself and as individuals on the police department, you would know best. So I thank you again for this topic. So why don't we, jump in? So I'll let you, kick us off, Shannon, just to kind of kick off the topic. Know your rights.
I think it's really important to have people feel some level of control during these interactions. I think traditionally the public feels as though the police come in and maybe during a traffic stop or a radio call, we are controlling everything. And to some extent that's true, but there's a lot of ways that the public can have feedback about what's going on. We definitely always want every interaction that we have with the public to be professional. We want to treat everybody with respect. We want to make sure that we explain why we're there and what we're doing. And when we're not meeting those standards, it's important that we hear about it. And so I always encourage people that if you don't feel as though the interaction is going positively, you can request a supervisor. And so we're obligated to provide you with a supervisor. There's times that people will say that they want the captain to respond to the field or somebody of a particular rank, and that's not always possible, but we always have field supervisors available to come out there. I also like to remind people that we have body worn video deployed throughout the field now, and so during those interactions, they're being recorded.
Is that all officers?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it like
Yes.
100? Oh,
So
wow.
that's all of our patrol officers
okay.
and the field supervisors have body worn video, and so there's going to be that opportunity to have it reviewed. If you think that something was said that was sideways, if you feel like, hey, they aren't answering the questions I'm asking, when the supervisor's out there, you can explain that, and the supervisor's going to be able to go back and review that video. And the final thing is that if that's not happening, and you've talked to the supervisor, you still don't feel like there's a resolution, we have a complaint process, and our position is that we investigate all complaints because the department standard is that we take everything seriously. So if you're saying that something didn't go well, if you're questioning the reason for why this happened, you don't feel like it's been met to your satisfaction, we want to go back and review that because it's really important. It's important that if misconduct's occurring, that we identify it and that we address it appropriately. And that really is a big piece of control that the public has. By being able to have a supervisor come out and they're impartial and they can talk to you about what's going on, review what's going on, and help make a determination, and then having that complaint process, it gives you more feedback into what's going on versus feeling as though the officers are dictating everything and there's nothing that you can do.
Would you like to just kind of touch on some initial thoughts?
Yeah, what it really boils down to a lot of times is what type of interaction are we having with the community? There's two types that typically we have. It's a consensual encounter and a detention. And so the first thing I think that's important for the community to know is which type of interaction am I having? Is it consensual or is it not consensual? Consensual clearly meaning that you give consent for the officer to speak to you, ask you questions, and if they ask to search you, if you give consent or not. The key in a consensual encounter is that the person has to feel like they're free to go and stop the encounter at any time.
Really? Okay.
Yes, and that's why it's called consensual. So if the officer does anything to make the person feel like they're not free to go, the community member can always ask, officer, am I being detained or am I free to go? And then the officer has to answer that question honestly. And if they say they're free to go, then there are no consequences. So it's not, you can't say like, okay, you're free to go, but then because you're free to go, now I can detain you because now you're suspicious. It doesn't work that way. So it has to be, again, like I said, something where the community member feels like they're free to go at any time. They can stop that encounter at any time.
And yeah, I just think it's important that, like you said, ask if you're not sure.
Yeah.
So the officers will have to answer honestly. And so if they say no, it's consensual, you can go if you want. You can discontinue. You can stop the whole contact. But if they tell you no, you're legally detained, that's where we go back to a lot of the things that we traditionally talk about within the Black community of let's be respectful, let's follow the orders that are given. And so on a detention, when it's a lawful detention and they're giving you directions, it's incumbent upon you to follow those directions. And that's where we talk about, hey, if you feel like it's still going sideways, to ask for the supervisor to come.
Okay.
And typically, as long as it's not something that kind of has that emergency part of, hey, we have to start moving things along, it's almost like it's a timeout. You wait, supervisor comes there, and now the officers will tell the supervisor, this is the reason for the stop. The supervisor comes and talks to you, and you start working it out.